Greetings, everyone. Well, this is the first Sabbath in April. The second Sabbath is the Sabbath before the Passover and the night to be much observed. So once again, I'm going to advertise the booklet, The Night to be Much Observed, by Wayne Stenhouse and by Stephen Green. And the cover is by Randy Vild. So, that's a perfect depiction. Full moon and leaving the night after the Passover. Couldn't be the same night. Now, again, if you don't have the Passover book, you better write for it and you better read it, because we're going to talk about today some doctrine. And doctrine is the precise teaching of the beliefs that we are to have and follow. Okay? Now, I'm also going to post online, which I should have done a long time ago, because this was the attack in the church, the Passover in the Bible in the Church Today by Lester Graby and Robert L. Kuhn. Okay? Infiltrators to destroy the Passover. There are always infiltrators. What did Peter say? Let's come to 2 Peter, the second chapter, and let's see what Peter said. While we're turning there, I've been editing the Greek in the book of Acts. Okay? And guess what I discovered? It's been, let me ask you a question. How much has always been in the Bible, and yet we didn't grasp it or we didn't understand it the way we should? Huh? A lot. So here I'm editing along, doing the Greek, doing the English, and I came to one place where the English said we. And that wasn't right. It should have been he. So I looked up the tense of the verb that was singular, third person, he. Okay. Now, there are always those trying to change or modify. Okay? By the way, how many watched Go meeting last night? Okay. Excellent message by Roy Asante. A little too long, but he made it very clear. Satan never comes to say, try this sin. He always comes to say, I've got a thought. Oh, really? What is that? It'll be a benefit to you. See? A real benefit. Don't you want a benefit? See? You know, it's like the voice came to the man and said, here, bet on this racehorse. You're going to win a lot of money. Boom! He won $25,000. Voice came back again and said, here's the next race. Bet your money on it. He tripled his money, $75,000. So the voice came again and said, now there's a big race coming up. Now you take all your money and you bet on this horse. So he put it on. And he lost. So the voice came and said, too bad. And he said, I thought you told me I would always win. Well, you can't win them all. See, so not all ideas are good ideas, and this paper we're going to put up comes from 1978. So that's how much? Over 40 years. 41. Okay? Now, when false teachers come in, they don't come in and say, I'm a false teacher. Oh, good, we'll hire you immediately. No. Let's read what he says here. 2 Peter 2, verse 1. But there will also false prophets among the people, as indeed there will be false teachers among you who will stealthily, sneakily introduce destructive heresies. Very interesting. And they might not do it all at once, because they test the waters to see how it is. And when is the most propitious time to bring in false doctrine? When everybody's relaxed and everybody is happy and satisfied and thinking everything is all right. Okay? Denying the Lord who bought them and bringing swift destruction upon themselves. And many people will follow. Many. Where can you find the word many in Matthew 7? Few find the narrow way, many the broad way. Okay? And as we mentioned last time, the change from Sabbath to Sunday, how many of those people thought when they had their first Sunday service and it was all great and they had no problem with the Romans coming after them as Jews and they still used the name of Jesus, they sang hymns to him, they did all of these things, they preached about grace, they preached about the Eucharist, they changed everything, didn't they? See? Once you can change one thing, you can change everything. Did that happen with WCG? Yes, indeed. Many people will follow as authoritative, their destructive ways, and because of them, the way of the truth will be blasphemed. All right? In this paper. And how many times have we covered? If you want to destroy the faith of those who are true Christians, and I doubled that, what do you come after first? The Passover. Why? Because if you can change any part of that, you start incrementally removing yourself from God. See? And that's because,
Because it's your contract with God.
That's right. That's right. You are not renewing the covenant of your baptism. That's correct. See? Okay? Now, in this paper, guess what they say? We don't know where the name Passover was derived. What did God say? This is my, I don't know what it is. This is the Lord's Passover. Okay? So we're going to look at some things today. And there we go. Now, no, that's the wrong set of notes. Hold on. So what was the key thing that was used to confuse which day to keep the Passover on, the 14th or the 15th? Okay? And it's still a problem to this day. The Jews claim it has always from the beginning been on the 15th. But that's not what the Bible says. We'll see why they claim that. Okay? What are the two important things that tell us how we can identify when a day begins and when a day ends? There's one important verse in Leviticus. Yes, the Day of Atonement. Now, so let's turn to Leviticus 23. Okay. Leviticus 23, and I've got my handy-dandy old King James Version that I haven't used for years and years. But Leviticus 23. Now, isn't it interesting how God buries certain things in the Bible in places that you wouldn't expect it? Why does he do it that way? To find out, do you really want the truth? Now, another question. How many times does God have to say something in order for it to be true? What if there's only one verse that definitively tells us when the day begins and when the day ends? Leviticus 23. All right, let's see if I can find it here in the King James. Now, if we put out a Bible that had this, we get complaints the print is too small, so we put it with larger print, and we have a bigger Bible, and if that's still too much for you, you can put it on your computer or notepad and whatever you want. Okay? Okay. Now,
Just ask people to find.
comment was made, doesn't Genesis, the first chapter, say evening and morning, day one, day two? So you're correct. That's right. But the problem really gets very interesting. So let's read it. Verse 32. Now this has to do with the Day of Atonement. Now, why is this so important that it's written this way? Even though it's written this way and is very specific, the Jews claim that the Sabbath doesn't begin until you can see 3 stars at night. Oh, we'll fudge a little on working, you know. That's not what the Bible says. And the first thing we need to understand is the Jews, though they claim they're always right, are probably 90% wrong in what they believe, because tradition supersedes the Bible. All right, verse 32. It, that is the Day of Atonement, shall be unto you a Sabbath of rest, and you shall afflict your souls in the 9th day of the month at even. From even to even you shall celebrate your Sabbath. Okay? Now, even. What does that mean? Now, let's add another thing to the problem. Okay? Which is this. How many have a Strong's Concordance? All right. Strong's Concordance is good to a point. Strong's Concordance has Erev as evening or sunset, which is true. But it has nothing for the next segment of time, Bein Ha'arba'im. Okay? Why? Because Bein Ha'arba'im is a derivative of Be'era. See? And from even to even, now you can have, when does it begin? The Jews say, well, that begins about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay? But it really means from sunset. Have you ever seen the sunset go down at 3 o'clock in the afternoon? Okay? Now notice, from even unto even you shall observe your Sabbath. So this tells us definitely, with the Hebrew, from Barev to Barev, and the phrase is a little different in the Hebrew because it's a combined word. Now, let's read it in the Faithful Version. Verse 32. This is why we did the Faithful Version. Get rid of all the errors of the King James and other translations. It shall be to you a Sabbath of rest. You shall afflict yourselves in the 9th day of the month at sunset. From sunset to sunset shall you keep your Sabbath. Okay? Now, we've got in the Passover book, how long is sunset? Okay? When the sun touches the horizon, that begins Ba'erev, meaning the day is ending. When the sun goes down below the horizon, which takes about 5 minutes, the next day begins. Okay? And when I was coming back from Los Angeles one time, and it was just about sunset, I was coming up by San Luis Dam, before you come over the pass to get to Hollister. And there's a dam there, and it is straight flat. So I pulled off the side of the road, and I sat there and waited for the sun to go down. And I timed it, and it was just a little less than 5 minutes. Now, can every person, educated or uneducated, know when the sun goes down? Yes, even your little kids. Look, Daddy, the sun just went down. Hooray. That's how simple it is. But intellectuals have to complicate it. Okay? Now, let's come to Exodus 12. Here's where the first Passover with Israel is located. The question is, good thing you ask it right now, does that mean between the two evenings, from one evening to end the day, or to begin the day to the next evening to end the day? There's some people who believe that today. They do. So they say you can have the Passover any time during that time period. Okay? Now, Exodus 12. And I remember at my first Feast of Unleavened Bread, and at that time I was living in Burlingame, California, and I had my little old Nash Rambler, and I would drive over to the East Bay and ride up to Sacramento with the Barbies, okay? And this was the first time I was keeping the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So, duly, Ron Kelly, the minister at the time, was reading from Exodus 12. Okay? So, let's pick it up in verse 1. I'm going to read the King James. And the Lord spoke unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months, it shall be the first month of the year to you. Speak unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, In the 10th day, now we find in John the 12th chapter, that's when Christ was chosen with the voice from heaven to be the Passover lamb. Okay? Back here to Exodus 12. Speak unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, In the 10th day of the month they shall take to them every man a lamb according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for a house. And if the house be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next to him take and eat, take it according to the number of souls. Isn't that interesting? You are a walking, living soul, not that you have an immortal soul. See? Who ate the Passover, the people or the immortal soul? Okay. Every man according to his eating, you shall make the count. And your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. You shall take it from the sheep or from the goats. There are good goats. Okay? And you shall keep it up until the 14th day of the first month. Now, what does until mean? The end of it?
Up to.
Up to. Okay? And that's what it means in the Hebrew. And the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. And I was there, and we read down a little bit further. Okay. We'll get to it a little bit. He said, this is at the beginning of the day, which was correct. But I'm looking at that, and it's evening. A little bit later, I'm reading over here evening, and he says, this is the end of the day. And so my very first time, I had a question. How do we know? Okay. I just figured it was right because he said so, and he was right. Okay. So this, kill it in the evening, this is an entirely different Hebrew word. And this is the one when I was writing the Passover book and going through it when we had the church up at Fairfield, and Ed and Belinda Davis were attending there. And one Sabbath, Belinda came in and she said, if you say Bein ha'arba'im one more time, I'm going to scream. Okay. All right. Now, when we come over here to verse 18. So then he jumped over here after explaining, well, we had the Passover last night and blah, 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 and all that sort of thing. Okay. Verse 18. And in the first month, on the 14th day of the month, at even. What is the difference between evening and even? You shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at even. Now, how are we going to know? Now, we got this paper, Kuhn and Graby, and they were saying, and we'll come to Deuteronomy 16 a little later, that the Jews are right, the Passover was always on the 15th, and they killed the lambs at the temple from 3 in the afternoon until whenever they got done with them, which had to be before sunset. Okay? And that's the way it is. No question, no biblical proof, and here I am. I just recently finished the first edition of the Harmony of the Gospels. Okay? And I said, if there's anything new concerning the Passover, I'll be sure and let you know. So Dolores, remember this. I came home from the conference and I started studying almost all day and all night. And I had the preposition was this. If there is no place in the Bible which clearly distinguishes between Ba'erev and Bein ha'arba'im, that they are truly different, then the Jews are right. Now, we didn't have computers back then, so I had to get all the books, do all the studying I could do, and there is one place. Isn't it interesting? One place, Ba'erev, beginning and ending. One place, let's go to Exodus 16. Okay. One place. Okay. Exodus 16. Now, here the children of Israel came and they were murmuring against Moses and Aaron, verse 2. And the children of Israel said to them, verse 3, I'm still reading from the King James. Would to God that we died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt. Really? When we sat by the flesh pots, when we did eat bread to the full, For you have brought us forth into this wilderness to kill the whole assembly with hunger. Now, how's that for a converted attitude? Okay. After all that God did, all the plagues in Egypt, walking through the Red Sea, think of all the things that they saw and heard, and the passing over of the firstborn on Passover night, and they were all spared. What they should have done was gone to Moses and say, Moses, we're all really hungry. Could you please pray to God that we can have some bread to eat? And by the way, we'd like a little meat too. That would be nice. Okay? Guess what would have happened? What a difference, see? Remember that when you pray. If you pray and complain, you better repent and come up with a better idea. Okay? So, let's pick it up here. Verse 4. Then the Lord said to Moses, Behold, I will cause bread from heaven. Yes, I will rain bread from heaven, and the people shall go out and gather a certain rate every day, that I may prove them. Now, why do we have difficulties? Because we need to choose. What will we choose? Okay. Prove them whether they will walk in my law or no. And it shall come to pass that on the 6th day they shall prepare that which they bring in, and it shall be twice as much that they gather daily. Now notice, verse 6. And Moses and Aaron said unto the children of Israel, at even, which one? Okay? You can't tell from this. Then you shall know that the Lord has brought you out of the land of Egypt, and in the morning, okay, now remember the day that this was spoken was a Sabbath day. Okay? So in the morning, that begins day one, right? After the Sabbath? Yes, indeed. In the morning, you shall see the glory of the Lord, for he has heard your murmuring against the Lord, and what are we that you murmur against us? Now notice verse 8. And Moses said, this shall be when the Lord shall give you in the evening flesh to eat. Which evening? Doesn't tell us. And in the morning, bread to the full. Okay. So what happened? Let's pick it up here, beginning in verse 11. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, I have heard the murmuring of the children of Israel. Speak unto them and say, at even. Which one? You shall eat flesh. And in the morning you shall be filled with bread, and you shall know that I am the Lord your God. Now verse 13. And it came to pass that at even, which one? The quail came up and covered the camp, and in the morning dew lie all around the host. Okay? Now then, let's read it in the Faithful Version, because it straightens it all out. Chapter 16. Okay? Now, verse 12. Faithful Version. I have heard the murmurings of the children of Israel. Speak unto them, saying, between the two evenings. When is between the two evenings? We have a definition here in just a minute. You shall eat flesh, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread, and you shall know that I am the Lord your God. Now, verse 13, correct translation, because here between the two evenings, that's Bein Ha'arbaim. Now, next verse, and it came to pass at sunset that quail came and covered the camp. Now, why didn't the quail come sooner? The Sabbath day. Does God keep his own Sabbath? Yes. What if he sent it at 3 in the afternoon on the Sabbath day? Like one man wrote and said, well, all the people would understand that God was just trying to give them something. What's the difference of 3 hours? Okay, you know. And it came to pass, at sunset, quail came up. Now, read this again. Verse 12, between the two evenings you shall eat flesh. Can you eat flesh before it arrives? No. This is the key to answer the difference between Bein Ha'arbaim, that it must come after Ba'erev, sunset. Okay? It has to come after sunset. Why? Because God sent the quail at sunset. Now, I didn't want them wandering out trying to find them scattered around. So they came, and they were all kind of in a daze themselves. So everyone just scooped up what they could, wrung the neck, skinned them down, and, you know, they could keep their fire going on the Sabbath. So then they probably threw a little wood on the fire right after the sun went down, getting ready to eat. Okay? How long does it take to cook a quail breast? I mean, you know, it's kind of like this. Probably not more than 10 minutes. Oh, and they had plenty. So you do one, eat it, do another one, eat it. Okay? So this tells us, since God sent the quail at sunset, that their eating of it was after they got the quail. So after they got the quail was after they cooked it, okay? This had to be between the two evenings, which is between sunset and dark. How long is that? Well, we also answered that question in the Passover book. Answered it this way. I was down in Texas with Alexander's, and we were at San Antonio, and they had this big needle restaurant at the top. So we went there, and it was late on the Sabbath, and so they had it so it would turn. So here we are, 200 feet in the air, flat land of Texas. Perfect to understand how long Bein Ha'arbaim is. So, we watch the sun go down, boom, set the timer to where it got dark, and we were up so high we could look over to the east and see the darkness coming, and look to the west and still see some of the sun, you know, little specks of light on the west. It took an hour and 15 minutes. Okay? Perfect timing. And that was about the same latitude if you go backward over to the Middle East where the children of Israel were. Okay? So between the two evenings, or Bein Ha'arbaim, you shall eat flesh, in the morning be filled with bread. Now what happened when they wanted to store the extra bread during the week? Breed worms and stink. You ever cleaning something out is really bad and you stick your hand in it, oh, what a terrible, stinky mess. So that was one miracle. What was the other miracle? They could gather twice as much on day 6 and it wouldn't breed worms and stink. And God said, tell the children of Israel, don't go out and look for bread on the Sabbath because it won't be there. So some of them got up, they went out and looked for bread, and there wasn't any. And God got really angry. And he said, how long refuse you to keep my laws, commandments? Okay? But God kept his promise, because you read here in chapter 16. Chapter 16, right at the end of it, okay? Verse 35. And the children of Israel ate manna 40 years until they came into the habitable land. They ate manna until they came into the borders of the land of Canaan, and an omer is 1/10 of an ephah.
That means you wouldn't get another.
Yeah,
Stop.
there is another incident of quail in the book of Numbers. Now, let's come back to Exodus 12, and this combined with Leviticus 23:32 will make it abundantly clear. Okay? Exodus 12. Okay, let's pick it up here in verse 18. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at sunset, that ends the 14th. Okay? You shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at sunset. Ends the 21st. Okay. But when you end the 14th, what day begins? 15th. So the Feast of Unleavened Bread, 15th through the 21st. Okay? And always remember, counting is different than adding and subtracting. Okay? If you have, now this happened the other day, had 4 checks, okay, in the checkbook. And the last number was 40. Okay? So how many checks did we have? 37, 38, 39, 40. 4. You could see it right there. And Jonathan wrote them. Okay? Now, if you subtract, see, you're short. If you subtract 7 from 10, you have 3. So it's different than adding and subtracting. So this is where people get all mixed up, because it's not clear in the translation. The King James is almost hopelessly lost in trying to figure it out, which then what? For people who don't study and people who don't apply themselves, then they can be easily deceived. That's why this paper was written, to deceive. Okay? Now then, I need to get into Deuteronomy 16, but that will take longer than time left, so we'll just take a little break and come back and pick it up here.